unfortunately, and that kind of messes up our teams a little bit. So I've reallocated the teams a little bit, and I want to make sure that group 4 lost a lot of people, or lost a couple of people. Group 5 lost a couple of people. So John and Nicole, what I'm going to ask you guys, if that's okay. So you guys, Mike, John, Nina, and Nicole, you guys can work out the new arrangements of the roles and decide which data set of the 2 data sets that you've been working you want to use. Okay. Once again, but I do want to make sure that each team has, the right number of people to do the project. And group 3, what I did was I added Rebecca, who's remote. But I added Rebecca to group 3. So group 3, you've got an additional member to help you with the load that you've got. So Joseph, Hannah, Rebecca, Brian, and Jonathan, you guys are a group. And just for everybody, if you haven't been in touch with your group yet, please make sure you are in touch with your group. And that you're clear on your role and you've signed off on it, and you're clear on the data set that you're using and you've signed off on that too. Now we're going to have time at the end of today's class for the groups to get together and just sync up and make sure that you're all aligned. So the new groups can renegotiate some of the roles based on the new membership. Groups 1 and 2 are totally unaffected by any change, so you guys are basically staying the course. Okay, any comments or questions on that? Okay, so the good news is, the bad news is you might have been moved to another group. The good news is your group now has more people to do the work, so hopefully that makes up for the fact that you might have lost some time here. All right. So now, I wanted to do another normalization example just to make sure that we reinforce some of the principles of database normalization. That's what I'm going to do today. And however long that takes, we'll have the remaining time after that to do the group meetings. But how about I show you my screen? That might help. And while that's coming up, hopefully that's coming up. Yep, I'm plugged in. Oh, here it comes. I see something. Yes, I do. By the way, while this is warming up, I was just telling my class before this that when I was in industry, a year ago before I retired, when a holiday was coming up, our customer would always want to make sure that they had nothing to do over the holidays. They had got a nice holiday. So what they would generally do is they would issue a request for proposal right before the holiday, knowing that it would take us a certain amount of time to respond to it so that they wouldn't have to do anything until the proposals came back. That's smart. So basically they ruined our holiday by making sure that their holiday was okay. But, so I've tried to schedule your assignments in such a way that I don't ruin your holiday too much. So hopefully I was successful in that. I don't want to do to you what my customers used to do to us. All right. So let's do another normalization example here. So, this is a table that we're going to start with today. We have payroll ID, we have an employee name, we have their payroll category, and we have their payroll rate, and then we have the number of hours they worked for 3 weeks out of January 2018, and what they got paid for those 3 weeks. This is the table that we're starting with, and we're only showing a few records in this table. You can imagine if this table goes on for, say thousands of employees. Okay. So, we want to take this table, you can think of it maybe as an Excel spreadsheet if you want, a massive Excel spreadsheet. We want to take this table and we want to normalize this into a database. Okay, so we're going to go through that process. Is this like part of the thing? Am I able to open it? Yeah, this one is in modules. Let me make sure I gave you guys access to it.
Yeah, I don't see it. It's only up to normalization.
Yeah, no. So this is CSIT lesson 10 using dependencies for normalization and transactions table. I have a second part to this lesson that talks about transactions, and we're going to do that one also. But you're right, I didn't make it accessible. So now it's accessible.
Okay.
So you guys can download those slides. But you can don't pay attention to the second part on transactions yet because we haven't learned that yet. All right, so we're going to finish normalization. So here's the table we start off with. We have, as I said, this could be a very, very big table. I just stopped it after a few records. And we're going to go about normalizing this. Now, the first thing that we notice about this is, we've got a week and pay date and hours worked and paycheck. They have multiple values. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put this in first normal form. And we have to get rid of those multiple values. Okay, so that's the first step. So now, instead of Ann Stewart having one record that has multiple values, we now have 3 records for Ann Stewart and likewise for all of the other employees. Okay. So we've now put this table in first normal form. We've gotten rid of the non-atomic values. Now, another thing we could have done is we could have split employee name into, last name and first name. That might have been a good thing to do. If we don't feel that that's necessary, we can leave it as one field. I mean, that's essentially a complex field rather than the non-atomic value. But, step 1 is to get rid of the atomic fields. And we did that, and now we're in first normal form. All right, so first normal form is that easy. The next thing we want to do is we want to identify the dependencies here. And what I do is, you can determine employee name right away from employee number. The employee number identifies uniquely an employee name. And it also uniquely identifies what payroll category they're in. Okay, and if we take payroll ID and week together, we know the hours worked. And if we take pay rate and hours worked, we know what the paycheck value is going to be. Okay? So, these are the dependencies. These are the primary dependencies. And I drew those as lines on the top of this diagram. So, when you do this and you have an assignment where you're going to have to do this, this might be the first step that you take is identifying what these dependencies are. And from these dependencies, we can also get transitive dependencies. The payroll category identifies their pay rate. Executives get paid $30 an hour. Okay. We have a transitive dependency that has the pay rate based on employee ID or entry ID, because the entry ID identifies the payroll category. If we know Ann Stewart, this ID that corresponds to Ann Stewart is an executive level. And because Ann Stewart is an executive level, we know that the pay rate is $30. Okay. So that's a transitive dependency. A implies B, B implies C, therefore A implies C. Okay, so the payroll ID implies the payroll category implies the pay rate, therefore the payroll ID implies the pay rate. Any questions on that? Any comments? Okay. We also have a transitive dependency, and I should picture this a slightly different way. Let me fix that. Let me fix that line. Where if we know the payroll category and the hours worked, we also know their paycheck. You know, because the payroll category says what their pay rate is. And the hours worked times the pay rate gives us the paycheck. So we have that transitive dependency as well. Okay. So that's the first step, you know, before we go any further in normalizing this, you know, beyond removing the atomic fields, we have to understand the dependencies in this table. Does anybody have any questions on what I mean by primary versus transitive dependencies? Okay, these dependencies are transitive. Is we can know the pay rate just by knowing the payroll ID. But if we go from the pay rate to the payroll ID, because the payroll category depends on the payroll ID, then we know the pay rate. Okay. Likewise, we can know the paycheck just by knowing this person is an executive and they work for 40 hours. Because we know this person is an executive, we know their pay rate is $30, and therefore we know the pay rate. Okay, so that's the difference between primary dependency and transitive. Everybody good with that? Any questions on that? All right. So now we're going to use these dependencies to do the additional normalization. Okay. So the next thing we have to do is we have to remove any partial dependency. So for example, to know all of these fields, we need to know the payroll ID and the week. You know, those are the two things we need to know all of these fields. Right? But employee name and payroll category only depend on one of those things, the payroll ID. Okay? So we need to remove any partial dependencies. That means anything that just depends on payroll ID or just depends on week, you know, where those are the keys of this table. We need to separate out. Okay, so I've color coded those. You know, the ones that just depend on payroll ID are colored in red. And the ones that require both payroll ID and week are colored in blue. Okay. So to get it into second normal form, we have to separate those things that only depend on a subset of the key field from those things that require both fields in the key field. Okay, so let's look at what that looks like. So now we put it in second normal form. We have one table where all the values are just dependent on payroll ID. And then we have a second table where all the values are just dependent on both payroll ID and week. And then we have a third table where the values are just dependent on week. Okay. So we've removed any dependencies on partial key by separating out those things that just depend on one of the key fields and not the other. And now we're in second normal.
Take out, why'd you make a third table then?
Okay, the reason I made a third table is because the date you get paid is dependent only on the week number. It doesn't matter what the payroll ID is. Okay, so, you know, in the previous case, we had a super key that required both the payroll ID and the week. Okay, so what I wanted to do is I wanted to break out those pieces that just depended on the payroll ID and those pieces that just depended on the week. Okay, and that's how I got to the second normal. So here are the pieces that just depend on the payroll ID, and here are the pieces that just depend on the week.
You made it even more simpler by taking on pay date as well.
Well, the pay date just depends on the week. You know, regardless of who the employee is, week one, the pay date is always January 10th. Week two, the pay date is always January 17th. Okay, so that's second normal form. Everybody good with second normal form so far? Okay, the next thing we have to do to get to third normal form is we have to remove any transitive dependencies. You know, the pay rate depends on the payroll category. And, you know, when we have a payroll ID, we know what the payroll category is, and therefore we know what the pay rate is. But that's a transitive dependency. So we want to get rid of that transitive dependency. So the way that we do that is, you know, we have a payroll category, executive, sales, admin, sales. You know, each one of those has a pay rate. So to get rid of that transitive dependency, you know, we say what category the person is in, and then we have the pay rate for that category. Okay, so now we've put it in third normal form. Any questions on that or any comments? So, you know, in second normal form, we're still allowed to have the transitive dependency. But in third normal form, we have to remove all those transitive dependencies. Now we are in third normal form. Any questions? Yeah, we had one transitive dependency in here. And we removed that, so now we're in third normal form. Okay, the next thing is when we go to what's called Boyce-Codd normal form, we can have no other determinant. Nothing else can determine a field other than the candidate key. We have a candidate key here. You know, if we had this table where the pay grade depended on the payroll ID and the job title, and the salary depended on the pay grade, you know, this would be in third normal form, but it would not be in Boyce-Codd normal form. Okay. So, you know, to put it in Boyce-Codd normal form, we would have to separate these out. We would have to have the payroll ID determining their job title, and the payroll ID and job title determining their salary. And, you know, the pay grade would determine the salary in a separate table. Okay. So actually, so to separate this into Boyce-Codd normal form, we would not be able to have a, the salary determines their pay grade, and their job title and ID determine their salary. So in this previous thing, you know, the salary tells what pay grade they are, but you need their ID and their job title to know what their salary is. Okay. So for example, you could have multiple job titles that had the same pay grade. Okay. So in order to put this in Boyce-Codd normal form, we would have to have their payroll ID and their job title determine their salary. And then their salary would be the determinant that determined their pay grade. Okay. All right. Step 6 is we can't have more than one multi-valued dependency. So, you know, in this particular table, we have their payroll ID in the week, determining both their hours worked and their paycheck. So we have two multi-valued dependencies. Hours worked is dependent on both payroll entry ID and week, and paycheck is also dependent on payroll entry ID and week. So in fourth normal form, that is not allowed. So to put it in fourth normal form, we would have to separate that one table into two separate tables. One that had their hours worked and another one that had their paycheck. Okay. So that's placing this in fourth normal form. Okay. And lastly, in fifth normal form, we might do further decompositions to eliminate anomalies and redundancies. So, let's look at this table here. Here we have the payroll entry ID, we have their job title, we have their department, and we have their office location, and we have a benefits package that they get, and we have their salary. Okay. To put this in fifth normal form, we might have their ID and their salary and their job ID. And then the job ID would say, what combination of things went along with that job title. Because what this allows us to do, for example, is if we later fire one of these people and replace them, we can then reference that new person to the job title. And essentially the job title doesn't change, we're just changing the person that's serving that job title. Okay, so this is something that we do to further eliminate any ambiguities or redundancies in the table. And that would place this table in fifth normal form. So the final schema for this database in fifth normal form would have an employee table that included the employee ID in their name and their category ID. Okay. And then we would have a table. Actually, I left out a table. Oh no, I have. Yeah. Okay. I left out a table. And then we would have a table that had their payroll ID, their salary, and their job ID. Then we would have a table that described what that job ID meant. And then we would have a table that said for the salary that they were given, what pay grade they were in. Okay, and now this database is in fifth normal form. Now this is a lot of, stuff and a lot of tables. And if we wanted to assemble the original information from this table, we would have a lot of stuff to join together. So we may decide for performance reasons that we want to denormalize this. In the interest of doing fewer joins for, queries that we do frequently. So we don't always want to put a database in its most normalized form. We have to make that judgment based on, what we see as the most common usage of that database. But when we look at a database, we should be able to make the decision eyes open. Okay, we're leaving this database in third normal form, or we're putting this database in voice cod normal form, fourth normal form, fifth normal form, etc. Okay, anybody have any questions on that?
Is the schema the same thing as the ER thing? Because it looks the same.
Yeah, a schema can be translated into an ER diagram, and vice versa. I mean, we talked in our last class about how to translate an ER diagram into a logical schema. This happens to be a pictorial representation of a logical schema. Okay. But I used it for the purpose of this discussion on normalization. All right. So, that's the other example I wanted to do for normalization. And what I wanted to show you also is you've got the homework that's due tonight. That is the JDBC program. And you've got, oops, I got to fix this because I don't want to have this due. Okay, this is next week. Yeah, this is before the holiday. You do have an assignment due Wednesday of next week, which is the ER model for your hobby. Similar to the one that I did.
Wait, does it say November 23rd?
Right? Yes.
That's a Monday.
That's it.
Bill?
It's a Tuesday.
That's odd.
Yeah, we don't have class that day.
Oh, okay. For some reason I thought it was.
Oh, somebody say that. That assignment is due Tuesday of next week. And after that, you're going to have a normalization and transactions assignment. You know, we haven't done transactions yet, so I'm waiting until I teach transactions for that one too. But that'll be due December 14th. So when we get back from the holidays, we're going to do transactions. You know, I'm going to teach you about database transactions, and then you'll have this assignment. But, you know, if you want to start the normalization piece ahead of time, over the holiday, not that I'm encouraging you or requiring you to do that, but if you want to start the normalization piece in advance of the holiday or over the holiday, you can download that assignment and work on that as well. Okay. So, you know, I'm trying hard not to ruin your holiday. So, you know, that assignment is available if you want to get a head start, but it's not due until December.
We plan to do, so why not?
Sorry?
I got nothing else to do, so why not?
Okay, yeah. All right, so, you know, the thing that is due also when you come back is, you know, you need to make sure that you're aligned with your teams on the key entities in your private data model. You know, what are the key entities that you're going to use? And that's going to be due, you know, when you guys get back. All right, so that's it for today. Ready? Well, what I want to use the rest of the time to do is I want you guys to get together with your project groups and meet with your project groups. And for those of you who are on WebEx,
I was gonna say,
you know what I can do? If everybody joins the WebEx, yeah, everybody joins the WebEx, what I will do is I will create breakout rooms of the project groups so that, you know, the people who want to talk to their project group members who are on WebEx can use that breakout room. You know, I'll assign you to the breakout room. Okay. So the rest of today is for a project meeting. And Nicole, hopefully I answered your question about how that works for today. All right, so everybody please go to our homepage and log on to the WebEx. Okay, and I will begin to design the breakout rooms.
and then the people that are here, do you still want all of us to be in one part of the room?
Yeah, you guys get together in one part of the room and we'll tie in the people in the breakout room. All right, so the first section, Andrew, Alec, Nicholas, and Ruth. Okay, so as soon as you guys are ready, hopefully put you in the right breakout room. All right, let's go this way. Brian, what group are you in? 3. Brian, group 3, okay. Hannah, what group are you in? 3. Joseph, what group are you in? Okay. John, what group are you in? I think there's 4. Oh, yeah, there are only 4 groups. Sorry about that. Yeah, okay. So Michael, what group are you in?
Both of the mics are in group 5.
Good. And Nina, are you also in 5? And I miss Jonathan. Jonathan, what group are you in? Three. And Nicole, which group are you in? Oh, Ruth, I missed you too, Ruth. Which group are you in, Ruth? Number one? You're the only one here from group one?
No, I'm here too.
Oh, Andrew, are you on the,
I'm in group one with Ruth, Alec and Nick.
did you join the,
I'm struggling accessing it.
oh, I'm sorry. Nicole's on. All right, and Nicole, which group are you in? Let me see, you're in group 4, 5, yep, okay, thank you. Okay, and I'll start those sessions.
What are the access?
Anybody else who hasn't joined? I'll make sure you're in the session. Keith, you're the only one in group 2. You're from group 2. Well, you guys can meet. You don't have to be.
Oh.
There's nobody remote.
That's what just hop over then.
Okay, so do stuff.
We're gonna go.
Oh, Rihanna, yeah, okay. What group you're in? Okay, Rhiannon's also in group 2, so you guys can meet. Meet Rihanna. Let's go to everything.
Nick and Alec are struggling.
So the said that we didn't have,
Thank
Yeah. It's only the. Yep, they